Hello.
Hello, Helena. This is Max.
Good morning, Max. How are you doing?
How am I this morning? I recorded a video, a sort of journal entry earlier about all of these intersections that I have been working with that are connected to Bianca's story.
Okay.
And I've been sitting with a lot of parts of this, and I've been practicing my breathing. There are so many different situations that I'm aware of where people so crucially need information about this and they're not allowed to talk about it. That's been so present for me today. So that's what my morning was sort of like. How are you? You're 6 hours earlier than me. I'm recording now, and we can just continue how we do,
Yes.
if that's okay with you.
Yes, of course. So it's only 7:03 a.m. in Hawaii, so it's very early. But it's okay. I am up every morning very early. It's fine with me to do this.
I love the early morning. It's one of my favorite things.
So, today we went to, as I told you, you probably read the whole outline.
Yes.
As I told you, we went through the trial. We didn't win, but I am proceeding to the appellate court in California.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to take it as far as possible. At least this will have exposure. Exposure to me is very important now at this point.
Yes, and there's my understanding is there's a whole process of, whether you win one court case or not. It's whatever series of court cases or court. I don't know how there's another way of saying that, but it's not about just winning one court case. It's about a conversation that's happening in the court system.
Yes, and for me, I was actually asking my attorney last night because we got the offer from them to settle, financial offer, but way back, and I have refused that. Not only because the money was not what would compensate for my daughter's death, that was one issue, but not as much important to me as the factor that I would never be able to talk about it.
Is that what it said, that you can't talk about it if they settle with you?
Yeah, if they settle, they'll give you a gag order, and you are not allowed to ever reveal the details because they can come and sue you back for that. So to me, I have rather these details outside because at this point, what has happened to my daughter, it's not only the claims we have used during the courtroom, during the legal proceedings, because there were only a couple claims, but what everything was done to her within the first 24 hours, and that is striking. This is really not part of the medical malpractice. It's a part of something much, much darker.
When you say 24 hours, do you mean the first 24 hours that she was admitted to the hospital?
Yes, first 24 hours, my daughter went from fully alert-oriented, like you and me, being in the coma and unresponsive, with the help of the drugs and other stuff. So, our medical expert was able to select only claims. He had to identify what was the final cause of her death and where there was no return no more. He cannot talk about all this other stuff, this contributing factor, and these contributing factors like major narcotics for no reason are the major factor, according to me, being a nurse.
So was it within the first 24 hours that you noticed the notes about the drugs she should not have been given? There was no reason for them to be given.
Yes.
That 24 hours as soon as she was admitted.
Yeah. So as soon as she was admitting, they started fentanyl to give her. Nurse was assessing her. Bianca told her, it works like this. At first they kept her in emergency room for 9.5 hours.
Right.
And then they took her to ICU. You do not, and in emergency notes is documented that she was stable and she did not require any critical care. She is not a patient who is not requiring any critical care while she's in emergency room. She's stable. She's kept there for 9.5 hours, but they are shipping her to ICU. We have never, in my experience, shipped a patient to ICU who were stable in emergency room, who did not require any critical care, and stayed for so long in emergency room, because there is a time gap. There is like about 2 hours, even by their hospital protocol, that the critical care patient, if they decide for the patient to go to ICU, the patient has to be transported to ICU within those 2 hours, which is the time for the critical patients. Other patients can stay in emergency room longer. That's not a problem. Mm-hmm. They can be treated the same way in emergency room as they can be treated on the general med surgical floor, but not in this case,
I want to let you finish. I don't want to cut you off.
Mm-hmm. No, go ahead. Yeah, that's where I kind of finish with this one.
Well, sir, I guess I have one question, and then we can go to your notes, which are they're really excellent notes. I was reading them and I was thinking a lot of people need exactly this information. Maybe we could publish the text or some version of the text with our audio.
Yes.
I was going to ask you, in the work that you've done through this whole situation, have you run across others who described this first 24 hours thing, where a bunch of these things happen in the first 24 hours that someone is in a medical environment? Is that feels conspicuous to me, but I don't have specific items that are coming to memory, and I'm wondering if you've run across others.
I know about one case, but this one I am not allowed to talk to about. Mm-hmm. But there is a lady, and I don't have her name with me now, in Texas. She actually did the YouTube video with some journalists, and she talked about her daughter, what has happened to her daughter, and everything was happening also within the first 24 hours. And I am gonna send you the link to that video.
That would be great. Do you remember where it was in Texas?
I am not sure which city in Texas, but
I'll be very curious.
I am going to send you the link to that video once we finish the interview.
Thank you.
So, I wanted to kind of touch on different things here. The most important thing, nobody should never go to the hospital alone these days. Mm-hmm. These are not the times when patients should go alone to the hospital. And then also, whoever goes with them should have at least some knowledge, because this is very confusing. The medical informations are very confusing. And they can manipulate everything very easily if you don't have any slight knowledge of medical. It's built
that way. It's built to allow people to do that, unfortunately.
So then also what is important is to keep some type of diary. If you stay with, let's say, with your family member in the hospital, it's important to document all the medications they are given. Always ask the nurse, what are you giving to let's say, my sister, my mother? Tell me the name, tell me the dose of the medication, the procedure which were done, days, times, the questions, what you had asked them, for example, I kept asking them what has happened to my daughter, and their only answer was, it is critical, it is critical. They have never told me what they have done. Of course, who would? But everything was critical. I knew that it's critical, but if I don't have access to the record, even as a nurse, I can only speculate.
There are many families that just hearing that, they wouldn't even know where else to go with it, and nothing else would ever be done.
Yes. And also what is important to document the name of the medical providers. With each, let's say the nurse tell you, I will be placing, let's say, NG tube in the patient, then you ask her, what is your name? And document the time, document what was done, the date, and the name of the provider. Those are very important things, because even though you get medical records later on, they can redact many things. Many things is redacted and altered. So it's always to have your informations. It's very important. Many years ago, when I was a nurse working in New York, later on I understood why this was done, but at the beginning I did not understand one thing, and that was primarily with Jewish people. They would always keep the watch over the patient. Always. There would be always somebody with the patient 24 hours, and they were taking a notes. And I could never understand it why. I was questioning, aren't we doing enough for the patient? I could never understand it. Now I understand why.
Yeah.
They were ahead of the game. So then also, if the patient dies, it's very important to have an autopsy. Because you most likely, if you suspect something when terribly wrong, you will want to proceed with the courts. And in that case, you need an autopsy. And where I went wrong, I did not know anything. I went along with the autopsy to be done with the same facility where my daughter died. This is wrong. You have to find a private medical examiner and do the private autopsy outside the hospital. Because as I have found out later on, my daughter's body was returned to me without the organs and without the eyes. And I have found what has happened. I had the autopsy done, then we had a funeral, the cremation. And at that point, I still did not know. I only saw the eyes were not there because her eyelids were really tightly glued and her eye sockets were very hollow.
Oh,
yes,
sure.
but I did not know about the organs were taken. And after we did cremation, almost a few weeks after, I have received the autopsy report. And it said that the organs were removed. They took the organs. What they do with them, they sell them for the research or for education. And they did that without my consent.
They did that without your consent, and they did that in a way that really makes suspicious whatever they say they did.
Yes. Because what I have given them the consent just to perform the autopsy.
Sure.
And as a nurse, way back, I used to go to the autopsy. We used to go as a nurses to familiarize ourselves with everything. And I know how autopsy is performed. When the autopsy is done, the organs are removed, studied, and placed back into the body. But this was not done. They removed the organs, they kept the organs for education, research, whatever. They sell that. Even though these organs are used for these other purposes, and there is many other purposes what they use them for. I don't want to even say that. But they use them for education and research, and they sell them for the money. Hospital is still generating the money on everything they can.
And I think that in any case where a family or individuals are not tracking that this is happening, you don't even know how your loved one died. If the organs can be harvested and they can give you basically no information with no accountability, there's no way for you to know that your loved one died in a natural way or in a way that could not be prevented. There's no information there. There's no responsible professionalism there at all that I can tell. That was about a few days before the funeral. I was even thinking maybe I should have a body flown to New York and have a private autopsy. I started thinking about it. After this autopsy was already done, I said maybe I should have a second opinion.
right? Good, I didn't flew the body to New York, because if they would open her body, there will be no organs to study.
Oh, and you didn't know that yet?
I didn't know that yet. No. Wow. So they actually prohibited me from having the second opinion autopsy, because sometimes people have more than one autopsy if they are not satisfied, they suspect something and they are not satisfied. But I had no report. The report was given to me after I did the cremation. They have everything so well calculated how to do this, to confuse people, to protect themselves from the legal, things and everything. Yeah, so if that, what is also very important for the people when they are signing the consent, they have to look at the consent for the autopsy very carefully, because they are, the autopsy calls only for the autopsy, actual autopsy, and tissue removal. Tissue removal is okay, because tissue is very small slices from the organ which are used under microscope. We can barely see those little slices from the organs. That's okay, but to remove the organs, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. Then also they have to look of when the patient dies, they have to also get immediately medical records, because before the hospital even has a time to do different reductions or alterations to the records. Because once you asking for the records, they become suspicious. They know that something will be happening. And they become creative. At that point, they start really being creative. They knew that I will be requesting the records already when Bianca died, and so when I requested my first record, they kept me almost a week. They said they have to fix the record. That's what I was told.
You were told that they have to fix the record. That's an interesting thing to be told.
Yes, yeah. So I was waiting for the first record to get almost a week. And then they called me. They said, we have a record for you, Miss Krizek. So I said, fine. So they told me it's going to cost you like $1,700. I said, yes.
Wait, did it cost you that much?
Yes.
Yes. But these are the records of your family members. These are the records of your health. Shouldn't this belong to you already? Why does it cost money?
They charged me that kind of money, and I think I was overcharged on that. So that was, it was almost a week after I have requested this record from the, medical information office there. So record office. So I went in, I requested that, and about a week later, when I was still staying here, they called me. They said, your record is ready. You can have it after they fixed it to some extent. And so I was thinking about it. They asked me, you need to pay $1,700. I don't remember exactly, but it was over $1,600. And so I said, I was thinking about it as a nurse, and I said, whatever has happened to her happened first 3 days. So I told the lady, you know what, seclude this record and give me only first 3 days of her record. So she gave me first 909 pages of the record and charged me something over $100. But then later on, when I was with my first attorney, he said, we will need the remaining portion of the record. And that's when the problem started. I have requested the remaining portion of the record, and I sent them the request. I had a tracking number, and then almost 6 weeks had passed, and I have not received the record. So I called them, and they said they never got it, even though the tracking number told me that the hospital received my request. They lied to me at that point.
6 weeks later. Wow. $1,600, $1,700, you could pay them and they could invent the entire set of records from scratch for that amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so what has happened after? I told them, well, I need those records. So I gave them even my credit card number. I told them, please charge my card and send me the record. I need them. So two weeks passed now, and I don't see the records. So I called them back, and they said, well, we have charged your card twice, but it was declined. There was $10,000 on the card. Card cannot be declined.
Did they ever even tell you that they were going to do that? They just did it? Oh, no, I'm sorry. They didn't charge that amount. My brain heard it wrong.
No, they didn't charge the amount. What they were doing, I called my card company and I asked them, how come my card was declined if there is $10,000 on this card?
If it's available, yeah.
Yeah, and the guy told me, well, we know, but what was happening? Somebody was trying twice, a charge, and they were punching wrong number. But that was deliberately done to slow the process.
Oh.
Yes,
yeah.
They did it deliberately to slow the process for me. So they thought maybe they're going to discourage me from everything. So I called them. That was almost 2 months, coming up, and I had no record. So after they did this with the card, and I have no record, so I called them, and I said, I need those records. I gave you guys my credit card number and everything, and they start playing another game with me. We have to start all over again from the beginning. We're gonna send you the forms, and you have to fill them out and send them back to us. They were playing already, slowing the process. That's what I call it, slowing the process.
It's amazing.
So I let her telling me this, and I told her at that point, I said, you know what, that's fine, whatever you want to do, but I was in New York then, and I told them, I'm going to the FBI office this afternoon, and I am going to ask them about these records, what's going on. I hung up on them. Under 5 minutes, I get a call back. As soon as I mention FBI, under 5 minutes, I get a call back. Oh, Mrs. Krizek, we are sending your records. Where would you like to have them?
They're a little bit transparent, aren't they?
Yeah, this is completely unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah. So they start they become very creative in the production of the record because they suspect that you will be suing them, and they are afraid of the exposure and everything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's then another thing what happens, and I have seen this also in my personal practice. What they do, there was a nurse who was with my daughter the day when I was still not there, the day when Bianca was still okay, when they start drugging her and everything. And I did not know who the nurse was, but when I came here, my daughter was already in the coma and unresponsive. But her roommate told me, I have to tell you something, because he came to visit Bianca that day before that went down, everything with her. So he told me, I haven't seen this nurse, Charlie. And I said, who is Charlie? And he tells me, well, that was Bianca's nurse the day when I came to visit Bianca. And when I came next day, Bianca was already in the coma and unresponsive. I said, okay, let me to find out who that nurse is. So I go to the nursing manager and the other people, the other nurses. Everybody was telling me the nurse is not present, nurse is on vacation. I have spent over a month with Bianca there before she died. The nurse was on vacation apparently all the time. They were hiding her until to the end. Almost like maybe 5 days before my daughter died, me and my daughter's roommate, we were coming out from my daughter's room and passing by the nursing station. And because my daughter's roommate recognized the nurse, so he said, oh, look, there is Charlie. And I said, okay. I said, okay, so let us go have a lunch and we'll come back and I will talk to her. So we come back, I ask for her. They said, no, she's not here. The way how they lie, they were trying to for me not to have access to that nurse, so I cannot ask her any direct question as to what was done to my daughter that day, when she was with her.
Yeah.
So that's and I have seen this somewhere else. This is another thing what hospitals do. They prohibit you to talk to the healthcare workers, especially to nurses who were with the patient that particular day when something happened. That's another thing. That's another trick what they are using.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And another thing is if you have somebody who has knowledge of medical record, and who has the best knowledge of the medical record are the nurses. They know that medical record in and out, where to find different information, and if everything is accurate and everything. So they what they do, they redact the medical records. Medical records are, certain parts are missing sometimes and they are redacted. Also, we have found they create multiple versions of the record. So so after I have received those initial records, then another record came and it says this is the legal record. I said, what is the legal record? I already spent almost $1,700 for the records. What is the legal record now? So I look at that legal record, and when they are in my first record, let's say there would be a progress note written by the physician for a particular day, let's say Friday. There will be a progress note when he sees the patient. But then this legal record has multiple versions of those notes. It has a note for the same day written by the same physician. It's a version 1 out of 4, then there was version 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, even 4 out of 4.
So you have to go through what is supposedly about the same situation and the same information 4 different times to figure out what the differences might be. And if those differences are relevant, is that...
Oh, I am so sorry. You know what it is actually? So let's say I will be a physician and I see my patient now, today. I write the note on the patient, what I have seen, how I have assessed the patient and everything, my plan for the treatment and everything. But then if they know something is happening, like a legal stuff, they create option version 2. Or version 3 or even version 4. Whatever place, they are adjusting it. When the claims come already, when you file the lawsuit, and I am filing this lawsuit because of this negligence, this was done wrong, this was done wrong, or this was done wrong. They creating the version of the note. So this second note for the same day from the same physician will be a little bit different than the first one.
Do they try to hide versions, or do they make all of the versions available?
They make all the versions are available, but each one has little differences.
Do they say why? I'm very curious how they explain this. When I noticed this in the notes that I was reviewing before we got on the call, I was looking at that and I was thinking, that's so interesting that they do that right out in the open, or sort of out in the open.
Yes.
What do they say about it?
They don't explain that. They don't explain, but I actually, because I also am a legal nurse consultant, I took recently, I did not know too much about it. I knew this exists already, but so I took the course with this other legal nurse consultant from Pennsylvania, and she talked about it. She's very knowledgeable about this version creation. So this was specifically the course how this medical record can be redacted and altered.
Fascinating.
Yeah, how creative they become. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. So there was also what they do. They copy forward. Copy forward in the medical system is very very prominent. So in my daughter's case, there was one nurse who assessed her the day when she was kind of deteriorating from the drugs they were after they start drugging her. At 8 p.m., she assessed my daughter as she was alert oriented ×2 to a person and the place. She was slightly confused. She was thrashing apparently in the bed because she was deprived of oxygen, but she had a clear speech. And then they take my daughter to the CT scan, and when they bring her back, she was already, after she was intubated, they take her to the CT scan, they bring her back, and her PO2 was only 47, so we know there was a brain injury. And the nurse my daughter already at that point was in the coma and unresponsive. But the nurse, that happened in the gap of 4 hours from 8 p.m. to midnight. But the nurse at midnight, instead of reassessing a patient and documenting, because patient was not at this point anymore oriented ×2 as she was at 8 p.m. She was in the coma. She was unresponsive. But she takes that note from 8 p.m. and copies it forward. So it looked like my daughter, who was now in the coma, was still oriented ×2. She still had a clear speech, even though she was intubated. She could not have a clear speech, and she was in the coma. She was unresponsive. So that's what they do.
It looks like, well, here is a spontaneous brain injury. We don't know how it happened, but that's what the documentation says, so it must be what's going on. This isn't documenting the healthcare experience that a person is having. This is doing something else.
It's criminal. It's fraudulent. It's a fraudulent documentation. Yeah. Because that nurse, if she saw every 4 hours, you're supposed to do different assessment. You have to reassess the patient because this is a critical care ICU. The patient's condition can change very rapidly, but you have to. My daughter's condition has changed because what they have done to her. But you still have to reassess the patient. You still have to.
You have to know what happened before. If they're just passing it through. Is it erase the previous information when they pass it through?
No, it's there. The previous information is there.
But don't they feel like it seems like it would be very contradictory and confusing to do that that way.
Yeah, no, she just copied forward the note, but the note did not reflect the condition of the patient at that point anymore. Yeah. Because the patient was not oriented ×2 or had a clear speech because she was intubated. How could you say the patient at that point had a clear speech if she was intubated? You cannot even talk to the patient.
Right. I'm so curious when you were in court with all of this, and that in this case it didn't work out. There are some of these things you're mentioning. I'm like, what did they think about that in the court case? But I won't ask you that yet. But I'm really curious to ask you more of those questions at some point.
There was, so what has happened during the intubation, prior to the intubation, you give the patient medications to sedate them a little bit, and paralytic agent. I probably had talked about it before. So you give them Bianca received etomidate. Etomidate is the sedation. It has very short life. It's out of your body within 15-20 minutes. Done. And you are back to normal. Then they gave her 2 milligrams of IV Versed, which is not actually a sedation drip. That's out of your body quickly too, maybe up to 60 minutes. It's out. Okay. It's only 2 milligrams. And then they gave her a rocuronium paralytic agent. Paralytic agent lasts in your body for 1 hour on average, and because Bianca was dehydrated, could be even longer. And at that point, remove her from the ICU, take her to the CT, routine CT. You never remove the patient for the routine CT from the ICU setting, especially not when the patient has no sedation on board. Sedation drip, I'm talking about sedation drip. And the patient is paralyzed. So my daughter was not sedated anymore, but she was paralyzed with the paralytic agent. Mm-hmm. And they are removing her. They have no proper medical team on board. You always have to have a doctor, nurse, respiratory therapist, and there has to be a documentation about this removal, how the patient tolerated this strip. And you remove them only for emergency tests, not a routine test. Mm-hmm. And that's what they have done. They removed her. And there was no doctor. We already know. One nurse, she says she went with her, but now we had find conflicting findings that she did not go with her, that she was actually staying in the ICU, and that respiratory therapist went with her apparently, but they don't want to tell us the name of the respiratory therapist, and there is no documentation, there is no note. All the other transports outside the ICU, what they have done for her, are documented. This is the only transport which is not documented. Then my daughter was dehydrated. They bring her to the CT scan and they give her a contrast dye. Contrast dye, you never give dehydrated patient because there is an immediate kidney injury. Mm-hmm. And she was already dehydrated. That's what she came to hospital with dehydration. Yeah. So you already will have what we call pre-renal acute kidney injury from the dehydration. This is correctable. Once you start rehydrating the patient, it goes back to normal. But they, on top of her being so dehydrated, they still give her a contrast dye to cause damage to the kidney. It's wow. Yeah, and so what has happened after she comes back, and she obviously was in the coma, unresponsive, but she had no sedation drip. When you give somebody paralytic agent, rocuronium especially, there is a requirement that you start the patient on sedation drip, continuous sedation drip. That was not done on her. That's why we know sedation drip was not started on Bianca until 12 hours after intubation following morning. But she was in the coma and unresponsive when she returned from the CT scan at that time. And the nurse at 4 a.m. documented. I have received, there was a new nurse who came on the shift at 3 a.m. She documented, I have received a patient who is now in the coma and unresponsive, and there is no sedation drip at that point. And during the trial, I will mention that already, during the closing arguments, their attorney looks me in the eyes when he was doing the closing argument and saying, there was a sedation drip. I know there was no sedation drip. It would be documented in the medical record. There was no sedation drip for first 12 hours of the intubation.
Did he prove it? Did he offer evidence of it?
No, he didn't prove it. He just was making that speech, that final closing argument, when he was telling this to the jury. I was ready to stand up and I said, you are a liar. But I had to hold the table so hard not to do it because my attorneys would be upset with me.
It sounds like a power move. It sounds like if you drop something in right at the end where people are less likely to check it, they might think that it's true.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's looking me in the eyes, and he is, lying to me right in my eyes. And he knows that there was no sedation drip because it's documented in the record when the sedation drip was actually started 12 hours after intubation. So it's unbelievable what you experience with these people. It's completely unbelievable.
It's like an enchanted forest where the trees move and you try to find your pathway through it, but people are messing with everything along the way.
Along the way, yes.
Yeah.
That's why I believe what was done to Bianca was deliberate. It was not the part of the malpractice, because malpractice, as I said before, it's the one thing. It happens. It can happen. We are all humans. But it's the one thing done by one person. It's not many people involved, and it's a continuous. For first 24, 36 hours, continuous insult on the human body until the body gives up.
There is a kind of body language to this kind of behavior in professional environments where people are so committed to not doing the things that would represent accountability or kindness to the family or making sure everybody's definitely on the same page. I guess I have this dream stuff in my mind from earlier in my life about how we used to talk about the most caring healthcare environments, and that still exists. There are amazing people in healthcare. You are an amazing person that I know in healthcare. And at the same time, all of these amazing people in healthcare are having to navigate environments full of predatory influences.
Yes. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. For the people who suspect something, what I wanted to say, they can either look for attorney to assist them, but attorneys don't like to take medical malpractice cases that much because they are very expensive to pursue. The people can start the case as a pro se litigants on their own, but they will definitely need to have a legal nurse consultant to go through the medical record to identify the merit, at least, if their case has a merit. And just continue looking for the attorneys, but you never should let your statute of limitation pass, because then you are not able to file the lawsuit. And the statutes of limitations are for medical malpractice are different in each state. On average, they are somewhere between 2 to 3 years. But, you have to move very fast with this.
That's super interesting because a lot of people affected by this would never be able to do that within 2 or 3 years after what happens to them because of it.
Yeah, you have to move very quickly. Medical record, if you cannot get an attorney, at least find a legal nurse consultant to go through the record and see if you would have a merit, and start the lawsuit yourself. Maybe even if you cannot draft the document, get a paralegal who will draft the initial complaint for you and start it yourself so you don't lose and keep looking for the attorney meanwhile. Because once you have that case if the lawsuit is filed, it's okay. Attorney can step in on the case anytime.
Okay.
It's not the problem. Just not to let pass that statute of limitation, because once you lose that, then you cannot file no more. And what I was looking to go to the state court or the federal court, I would never go to the state court. And I mean, not only here in Hawaii, but in any other state, because state courts are more like a family.
Sure.
It's a corruption.
Yeah.
There is another word for it, corruption. I think federal court are more... you get probably the better result in federal court, because I am even looking at my case. I was able to bring it all the way to the trial, and that's a big success for medical malpractice. Even though they were offering me a settlement way back, as I said before, but I would not be able to talk about it. So my question was actually, even I was asking my attorney, so they claim they haven't done anything wrong, but they are offering me a settlement, and I'm not allowed to talk about it. I don't understand.
Yeah, it's a pretty funny joke, if you ask me.
Yeah, you offer me money, you don't do anything to me. But you're offering me money, but I'm not allowed to talk about it.
You didn't do anything wrong, and I can't tell other people what happened? That's kind of interesting. Yeah.
What kind of law is that even?
I think that's a different set of conversations we can have in the future.
Yeah. How could you claim you haven't done anything, but you want to give me XYZ amount of money, but I cannot tell anybody about it?
Helena, how I don't know how to ask this question. I'll just try. How many people do you think actually make it to get to court about something like this? It's a very small percentage of the people it happens to, but I don't even know how to start thinking about that. I wondered if you had thoughts.
Yeah, it's a very, very small percentage. Firstly, a big percentage of the people don't even know that something has happened.
Yeah.
Because they lie to them. They are being lied and they have no knowledge of it to figure it out. The people who figure it out try. Some of these cases which are filed, the people just take the money and don't care if they have to talk about it or not, because sometimes what I think, I saw, as a nurse, I saw the darker side of that medical record, and I knew that's why I did not take money, because I want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, people just say, okay, they are satisfied. Okay, they give me, let's say few $100,000. I just take the money and that's it. I got relief, financial relief, and that's it. At least they are satisfied, or I got the settlement. Mm-hmm. But you did not study the record. There is probably many records, I truly believe that now, which are similar to my daughter's record, that something was done deliberately.
Yes.
That something was not just the accident, it was not true medical malpractice. I know medical malpractice happens. I'm not green, I know that. We are humans. We all can make error. But that would be one error only by one person, not this sequence of errors within the first 24, 36 hours. And all these errors leading to the patient's decompensation.
Coordinated cover-up.
It's a coordinated cover-up, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so also I wanted to say, if the people want to file that lawsuit, it's doable. People can do it by themselves with the help of a legal nurse consultant and paralegal who will draft the documents for them. It's doable. And there is a fee what they have to pay in the court. It's I don't know. I think I have paid 4 years ago almost $400, but now it's maybe more, maybe somewhere between $400 to $600 for the initial filing. Mm. And then when they file that first document, which is called complaint and pleadings, where all the claims are listed. So they also have to have a summons ready before they go to the courtroom. And once they pay, the court clerk will stamp the summons, and summons are going to the defendants, the people they named in that lawsuit who caused the damage or the death of their patient, of their family member. And then the judge is assigned to the case immediately. You will know once you file, very same day, once you pay the fee and you get your summons stamped, then you will know who will be the judge assigned to the case. It is also good to familiarize yourself, just briefly. If you go to federal court, and I definitely suggest federal courts, state courts, I have no trust. Mm-hmm. The booklet is called FRCP. It's a Federal Rule of Civil Procedures. And they are those basic procedures what you might come across if you start that lawsuit pro se. Pro se means by yourself. It's from Latin. Then there is some term also called diversity of jurisdiction, because I have filed this lawsuit actually in Southern District Court in New York, but it was moved to Hawaii because of the diversity of jurisdiction, because it happened here, and most of the defendants lived here at that point. But once the lawsuit was filed, they all dispersed.
Oh, wow.
All gone.
How many people are we talking about that left the state? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, the people I have named in the lawsuit were gone from here. Yeah.
Oh.
So Yeah, and at that point, this is very interesting. I want to point out that CEO of the hospital resigned. He said he's retiring. Then CEO of Legacy of Life, this is an organ donation place, resigned too at the same time. Then Director of Department of Health resigned, retiring. I had a going on with them also. I wanted a survey into my daughter's death, but the survey was never done. They have staged the survey. I contacting them back after. And what has happened, I probably already talked about this previously, but I wanted them to do investigative survey into my daughter's death. And I was curious about those two medications. First, they given to confused patient, and especially to my daughter, who's so it's like this. At 7 a.m. that day, a nurse sent urine drug screen on my daughter. My daughter was taking morphine at home for the ankle pain. Urine drug screen comes negative, except the opiates come highly positive. By 8 a.m., she get the result. 8 a.m., she's assessing my daughter. My daughter tells her, I have no pain. She documents that the patient has no pain. But 22 minutes later, she's injecting the patient with fentanyl. Patient whose urine drug screen comes highly positive for opiates, who is saying, I have no pain, but she's still injecting her with fentanyl. Instead of approaching the physician and say, look, and physician, they knew what they were doing. That's why there was no treatment. This is what that's why I see deliberate intent here. Anybody else would come and say, this patient is hypotensive, has low blood pressure, urine drug screen come back highly positive for opiates. We have to give Narcan. We have to reverse. That's why we have antidotes. We have to give Narcan. You're not going to be giving more fentanyl and bringing the patient downhill. And that's exactly what they were doing.
It was written that they gave fentanyl 22 minutes after she was clear, but it didn't say why they gave it to her. And no. By your lights, there's no reason they should have given it to her.
They should have given Narcan because this patient is hypotensive, low blood pressure. Urine drug screen comes back positive, highly positive for opiates. You're not giving fentanyl. You have to give Narcan. You have to reverse this patient.
Wow.
You're doing completely opposite what normally would be done.
And was that also a magically disappearing nurse?
Yes. Yeah.
There seem to be some of those.
That was a nurse who was on vacation for 5 weeks while I was there.
Sure.
Yeah. That's the way how it's done.
Wow.
And you have no access to those people. They remove them temporarily. And so you have no access. Yeah. And so with this Department of Health, I was curious about, and then later on they gave her 2 milligrams of Ativan 3-4 hours later. They were supposed to check the SIVA score on her. They were not checking SIVA score for 28 hours, but they were injecting her Ativan from the SIVA score protocol, just for fun of it. When the nurse was asked, this particular nurse during the deposition, why did you give these 2 medications? I don't know. That was her answer. She does not know. So that's what I wanted Department of Health to step in and investigate. And I was concerned about those 2 medications primarily. There were some other questions. Well, they sent me a letter. They apparently did investigation. I don't believe so. I believe this was staged. And they sent me the response letter. They said that they are not able to find those 2 medications in my daughter's medical record. So I took their letter, I took the printout from the medical record where those medications are documented as administered to my daughter, send it to them, only never to hear from them.
So you never got any response to that, but you had their paperwork.
No, I send them paperwork, never hear from them. So maybe more than a month, I called them back. And they put another young man on phone in Department of Health, and I asked for those 3 people I was dealing with. One was named Veronica Mitchell, I was dealing with. Other guy was named Key Bradley, And the director of Department of Health, Virginia Pressler, was the director at the time. And I was told by this young man that they are all traveling internationally. All three of them were traveling internationally when I called back.
Do you have a list of the people you've been told have retired, who have left their jobs, who were just conspicuously out of the state or out of the country? What an interesting list of names that must be.
Yeah, and so what I did, I said they are traveling. I cannot do. I have resent this two times more afterwards to this person, Veronica Mitchell. She never returned my response. Never, because she knew they were lying to me. And at the time the lawsuit was filed, the Virginia Pressler, who was a director, she resigned. And I find out later on that the chief of ICU where my daughter died was sitting on some committee for Department of Health. You see how there is a conflict of interest, how everything is intertwined.
Yes.
All that crime, how it's horrible. It's almost unbelievable.
People know each other across in different disciplines, in different organizations that most people don't even consider what that means if people are working together across different organizations. And it's not something people are aware of, but a lot of terrible things can be done if nobody knows that that's happening.
If somebody wants to file this lawsuit pro se as by themselves, it's doable. But eventually, if it's something what I was dealing with, because it's much bigger picture, they will need an attorney. If it is the simpler lawsuit, only one defendant, it's doable. They can do it with the help of paralegal or legal nurse consultant. But if it's something complicated, you need an attorney for that. So I wanted to kind of tell the people the steps of the civil lawsuit. So first you file your complaint and your pleadings, and you send out the summons to your defendants, whom you name as a defendant. But particularly you will name like the physicians, nurses, or the hospital, the facility. And even the nursing home sometimes. Many people have a problem what happens to their family in the nursing home, so that goes there too. Then you are invited to attend what's called scheduling conference. And during the scheduling conference, that's the judge, a magistrate judge, not the judge on the case. That's a judge which is working with your judge, called magistrate judge. And he does scheduling conference, and he plans the whole lawsuit for you, how it's going to go. How next phase is the discovery phase, how long the discovery phase will last, how long when the trial is, they set the date for the trial and everything. At this time, everything was moved because of the COVID, but, before everything would run on the schedule. But, so discovery phase is the each party between the plaintiff, you are the plaintiff who is filing the lawsuit, and the defense is the people who caused the trouble for you. So they are things, interrogatories. You will send, or they will send to you the battery of the questions, what you want to know. First are general questions like where you live, if that happened to you, if you are still alive. But if it's about your family member who died, then they will want to know, what the person did, how old they were, and all these general question. And then they will want to know also the medical question, why, what did you suspect or whatever, Then they are depositions. And depositions, I would not advise people to go pro se, at least to hire a lawyer for one day for the deposition, because it's more detailed. And depositions are the equivalent to the testimony in the courtroom.
Okay.
So you do it on the oath. There is a court clerk who is present, and as plaintiff attorney, or you will ask the question from the defendants. Their attorney can ask the questions of the plaintiff. So it's a both-sided, like the positions, Then the admissions, it's also the document which is drafted, and you can ask like, were you working that day? Yes, or answer is only yes, no. Were you treating this patient, let's say Mrs. Smith, yes or no? It's only a battery of questions which are always answered with yes or no.
Okay.
And then there is a production of different documents. They can ask you for the death certificate. They can ask you for different medical records or autopsy report or different things. It's a production of documents. And then what's happening after this, from the beginning of the lawsuit, what's happening, there are certain motions, and both sides can file the motions. And from the defense point of view, it will be more motions like, we want to dismiss this case. That's what they work from day one on, how to dismiss it, how to have it strike, how to clear that case from the courtroom. So they don't have to deal with it. So all the motions are practically related to the thing from the defense point of view, how to dismiss this case. And they are looking for different case laws from previous lawsuits and different strategies. Everything about procedural thing and about the strategies. Nothing has to do nothing with the actual case, what was done, the facts. I mean, what was done to the patient at this point, but it's all based on the procedural thing, on the legal thing.
Interesting.
How to get so many cases, because of this, don't make it to the trial. Many cases are dismissed, so that's why I was even happy to make it to the trial.
Wow.
Then you can choose if you make it to the trial, you can choose, but this is what you choose already from the beginning. If you want to have a trial by the jury or by bench. By bench mean the judge will decide. There is no jury, but the judge will decide. But also from the very beginning of the lawsuit all the way up to the trial, there is something what's called settlement. And that's when they start offering you money, or and they will obviously start at the lower, at the bottom, but you should always start at the higher point. What do you think? And sometimes if people are reasonable, they can meet, they can settle the cases. Some cases get settled. Obviously, mine case, there was not, because there were two reasons. Firstly, they were not offering me sufficient monetary relief, and secondly, they did not wanted me to speak about it. If you know that this is true medical malpractice, that there is nothing deliberate behind it, it's probably okay to settle, because you're not gonna talk about it. You don't have to, because you know what happened. It was one error, one incident, and it's okay, right?
Sure.
But if there is so much deliberate thing behind it and they try to hide, you obviously know this is not okay. There is something much deeper here. And that's why I could not settle. I was offered the money, but I could not settle. Because of this, I can. You giving me money, as I said before, you don't want me to talk about it, and but you did something because you're giving me money.
It sounds like they're scuttled. It sounds like you've got them a bit on the run. Yeah. It sounds like they're having to scramble to cover up extra stuff that you're not supposed to be looking into.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, they've been covering up from day one. From day one, they've been covering up. I have never, I tell you, I have never been lied so much as I was lied here by these people. And not only the hospital, but also these governmental agencies like Department of Health, the medical examiner's office later on, because it took me 2 years almost to get a death certificate. And then the coroner took off too. I believe they let him go because they knew that everything is collapsing around this lawsuit. So they let him go because he probably told them, if you not let me go, then I'll bring other people down with me. And I believe that was the case. I truly believe that.
There are sure a lot more of them than the ones that will show up in any particular court case. We no longer, when we do research at these intersections in the network, we don't expect generally that something is an isolated case unless we really have a very good sense that it's an isolated case. Usually we find networks of perpetrators attached to whatever we're looking at, and that's just become so common that we can't dismiss it anymore, even though many people would like to.
Yes. So, there are two things in the trial. Either you win or you don't. I didn't win this trial, but from the verdict, which was done by the jury. But, even though I must say I was very pleased with the judge. I was very pleased with the judge. Because of him, probably this case made it all the way to the trial.
I'm interested to know more about that.
Yeah, and then you can appeal. You can appeal as a plaintiff if you didn't win, or if you won and the jury or judge would assign you a substantial amount of money, the defense can appeal because they might not agree how much money you were given and how much they have to pay out. So, as I said, a high percentage of these cases settle before the trial. That if this is a reasonable thing, if this is a true malpractice. If it was true malpractice, I would settle too. But in this case, I just cannot. I have a pride and I have an honor. And I have promised my daughter that I will take care of this because I know that this is not a true malpractice. That record is telling me the story, what was done to her. And as a nurse, I know this is not right. It's not right. I just cannot agree with that.
We're really rooting for you. We're really glad that you're doing it, and it's not an easy thing to do. And people who go through this sacrifice so much more than anyone recognizes. And you lost your daughter before this happened. Yes. And now for you to go through this process, I mean, I try to imagine based on what I know about what it takes to go through court processes, and it is really tremendous to be doing it.
Also, I wanted to say, if once the merit is identified by the person, by the plaintiff, or by their legal nurse consultant, then they will always need medical expert in that specialty where the person died. Like let's say it was critical care, or it was labor and delivery, or med surg, whatever unit it was, they will need an expert from that specialty, and those people are very expensive to hire. That's where many people do not sue because of that, because that is very, very expensive to have that expert. You can still pay for legal nurse consultant, but you still will need an expert. You can get a legal nurse consultant who will testify. They are nurses who testify in the courtroom. If you are able to find that, then this type of nurse, then you might cut your spendings on this lawsuit. And if that nurse can testify in, whatever was done to the patient, if she has a capacity, some nurses do with the higher education, if they have a master's degree or PhD, they can testify. And your costs will be much lower than if you was to hire a medical expert, the physician.
That's very good to know.
Yeah, the nurses can testify in the courtroom. If they are active or actively still working and they have higher education, nursing education, they are allowed to testify. We actually, the defense actually had one of those nurses died, but they did not bring her for the testimony because she was testifying practically in our favor.
Oh, really? But it was their witness, and she was.
It was their witness. They brought her in. They said we're gonna use her as a witness, but then they didn't call her for the testimony because she would mess them up.
Are you able to say anything about what that was, or the details of it, or should we wait for a different call and we should look at more of the court stuff on a different call? Do you think?
I would do that on the different one, but
sure.
she would mess them up. I said, why didn't they call her? And then I realized, yeah, she would mess them up, and my attorney said the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, so it's all about the strategies in the courtroom, how this works, and then also what has happened during the court time. We had one important defendant, and what has happened during the court time with this one important defendant, he comes in the first day of the trial, and he was supposed to testify the second day of the trial. He was supposed to testify, and he didn't show up. He didn't show up, even though my attorneys saw him that morning on the corner of the street.
Mm-hmm.
And when his attorney was asked in the courtroom that morning, why is he not here? I cannot say why now. I'm not allowed to, but because the matter is very sensitive. But he never showed up for the rest of the trial. He was one of the most important defendants, because we had three.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of those three, and he would not come no more to the courtroom. He was apparently upset about what happened to my daughter. And he would not come no more to the end of the court trial to testify. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, and actually, I am as we talk, I am looking for these things here. Just one second.
Sure.
I want to find something. So actually, I have clarified this with my attorney yesterday, and they gave me permission for the reasons which I can state here today. Why this defendant? It was one of the three important defendants which actually messed up our trial. Why he did not testify. So the first reason would be, his name is Dr. Aryoshi. The Dr. Aryoshi was unavailable for reasons too sensitive to be read in open court. That he was obviously distressed as to what has happened to Bianca, my daughter, and that he was seen in the vicinity of the courthouse on the day that he was supposed to testify. By my attorney saw him. I did not see him myself, but as a witness, he was supposed to testify as a witness. And his attorney told him, apparently phoned him, not to come to the court that day.
The story that all of this is building is really worth following. Once you get to a certain threshold of detail, you really have to find out the other details. And I'm very tuned to these conversations. I'm learning a lot from these conversations. Was there anything else that was said that you're okay to share?
At this point, I don't know what, because I'm trying to each time to check with my attorneys how far I can go.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that was about it. What I could at this point say, because as I said, I am planning to go forward. I want to go to the appellate court because our trial was kind of disrupted by this particular defendant who did not show up from the day 2 of the trial.
That was the second day of the trial.
Second day he didn't show up. He apparently came all the way by the courthouse. My attorney saw him. I did not see him.
Helena, could I interrupt you just for a minute? When you started looking for the thing that you read, your audio started sort of going back and forth, and I wonder if it might be, if you're wearing headphones, it might be your microphone moving, or it might be your hand accidentally covering the bottom of the phone or something like that. I thought I'd mention it to you in case there's something that we can do about it.
Oh, is it better now?
Maybe. Let's keep talking. We want to go back and say what you were saying, and I'll let you know if it comes back, if it's still a problem.
No, what I was saying, that my attorneys spotted him on the corner by the courthouse that morning, that second day of the trial, when he was supposed to testify.
Right.
And apparently his attorney called him and told him not to come, and that he was, this is a very sensitive matter, why he didn't come, I was told, as I had read here from what my attorney sent me last night, because I checked with them if I'm allowed to talk about this, and they said that Dr. Ariyoshi was unavailable for reasons too sensitive to be read in open court.
Okay.
That he was obviously distressed at what happened to Bianca, my daughter, and then that he was seen in the vicinity of the courthouse on the day that he was supposed to testify as a witness, and his attorney told him not to come to the court that day. Yeah,
that is really something.
Yeah. This was one of the, we had 3 important defendants in this. We had many others, but these were the 3 important because they were named as the defendants. We had other witnesses, like nurses and whose depositions were read at the courtroom, and we have a respiratory therapist and other specialists. But these were 3 defendants. He is one of the defendants. Yeah. Yeah. So this messed up our trial, actually.
So did you just complete everything else about the trial that you could? But, I mean, it sounds like that was a pretty important part there at the beginning.
This was a very important part, and we needed him to testify. And, this is what happened.
You needed this defendant to testify, and the lawyer told him not to come. It messed up the trial, and yet still there was a verdict against you, even though the defendant didn't, one of the primary defendants did not show up at all, and they still felt that they could finish conducting the court case.
Yeah, because the jury was not told why he did not show up.
Well, that doesn't sound like a complete court case to me.
Yeah, jury was told that I don't know what jury was actually told, really. Truly, I don't know. But what my attorney, when I checked with them last night, I have to go only what my attorney allows me to speak about. And he wrote me that Dr. Ariyoshi was unavailable for reasons too sensitive to be read in open court. And then that he was obviously distressed at what happened to Bianca, and that he was seen in the vicinity of the courthouse on the day that he was supposed to testify as a witness, and his attorney told him not to come to the court.
Maybe he didn't think he could keep a steady face. Yeah. Maybe he thought he would reveal something if he showed up. I'm speculating. We're not supposed to do that, but I come to this from a very particular angle. There's so many people that I interface with on a regular basis who are completely cut off from any discussion of court system accountability. I mean, so many people think, this is what you're supposed to do. And if this kind of thing happens, well, then you sue somebody. And if you don't know how, then someone will help you. And that's how it works. That's how we deal with crime. But it's very,
it's extremely difficult.
It's explained to most people in a very simplistic way to help them feel safe in the midst of something that will never protect them almost all of the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like, to me, I see that like I'm fighting with the evil.
Well, yes, I would say so.
Yes. And also, when my daughter died, and I started this process with my first attorney, who bailed out on me like 6 weeks, 7 weeks prior the statute of limitation was supposed to expire.
Oh.
Yeah, so, at that point, what crossed my mind, have you ever seen the movie Gladiator?
Yes. It was one of my favorite movies for a long time when I was younger. I haven't seen it in a while. I like the music a lot.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why that movie crossed my mind, but I felt I'm on the same spot as that man was in that movie. I am fighting, as he was fighting against the empire he served to, I am fighting against the sector I was working for so many years.
Yeah.
And that crossed my mind, that never leaves my mind. And, I don't know, maybe people believe all this government and everything. I don't believe them. I don't consider myself a slave. I consider myself a free woman. I don't consider myself a slave. And I will fight this till I cannot fight it no more. I'm not leaving this because what was done was wrong. It was not the malpractice. It was something extremely deliberate. And for I don't know what the reasons that was done, but the only reason I can suspect is illegal organ harvesting. I don't know why somebody would do all these things in first 24, 36 hours to one patient if you don't have any purpose behind it. It's not possible.
And they can't even carry on a conversation with you about it. They're professionals. They make money taking care of people, doing science, having achieved at academia, but they can't talk with the people they're in service to.
Yes. Also what I was thinking, if somebody was to ask me, can you write the screenplay for the horror movie? I would give them first 3 days of my daughter's medical record. Here is it. You have a screenplay right here. I don't have to even write it. It's been written.
Well, we can write the screenplay to go with the book. And whatever information we can share from the ways that we are experiencing what we're experiencing, all of us with these different experiences, you are in a position that you have made powerful, where a lot of people would never think of you as being in a powerful position. And in a lot of ways, you're not. The Gladiator reference itself speaks to that. But what you are doing with the opportunity that you have to say something and do something, it's a really powerful thing. It's really powerful in my world, and it really affects me a lot.
Have you ever seen on YouTube videos called Walk of Honor?
Walk of Honor?
Yes.
I don't think so, no.
There is many of those videos, and all those videos are about when they are wheeling that patient from ICU, young people, teenagers, early 20s, maybe into 30s, with some so-called brain injury. They are brain death. I'm not going to say brain injury because those are two different things. We can have a brain injury, but what they call brain death, the invented diagnosis, which was invented in the 60s. We all know about that. They are wheeling them from ICU into operating room for the organ harvest. And you see this family around that person, and what crosses my mind many times, how many of those parents know? Did they ever look into that medical record? Probably not.
Did they just take their word for it? And not, yeah, yes. Wow. Mm-hmm.
This is crossing my mind now, and this came just recently. I start thinking about it. Probably none of those parents really inquire. If you agree to the organ harvest, you obviously go along with the process. You do not question. You trust, as people supposed to trust, but I don't know. Yeah. So, and this is what I would like to, this is my point, what I would like to educate the people. Question the medical record. Is this really what it is? What you're being told? Because there is maybe many things you don't even know. You have no even idea.
I'm really glad that more people are starting to be in a place for themselves where they can start considering this. People are very silent about it. But one of the things we notice is that even though people are very silent about it, they often don't know how to talk about it. They often can't respond about it. It still changes people to know about it.
Yes.
And that's the most important part. That's been very hard for us because as a network, Intuitive Public Radio and all of what we've been working on for years, a big part of it has been using our collective voices to reach out so that someone hears us and responds to us. And most of what we've gotten is silence. Most of what we've gotten is no response. And it has taken a lot of work for us to really remember that because these are the subjects we're talking about, it's not really appropriate to expect as much of a response as to anything else. And what changes people is having contact with when we share our experiences, when we share these stories, and they can notice our cues and they can realize that they feel in their bodies that our bodies aren't lying about it. We make audio or video and it's not hearsay. It's not a rumor anymore.
No,
it's someone you can sort of start to get to know and make your own determinations on what you're learning.
We already know that diagnoses are sometimes being invented for the other purposes than just being actual diagnosis, medical diagnosis.
That's what I have thought a lot, looking at what we've been researching, and I would be very interested in your thoughts on that.
You know, because we know that this diagnosis of brain death, as even Dr. Burns speaks about, it was invented in late 60s for the purpose of organ harvesting. So they are legally, ethically, and morally covered for this, what is being done. The same way as this year was diagnosis of SADS, SADS, sudden adult death syndrome, invented to cover up for the vaccines injury.
There is so much hullabaloo in medical environments and in the marketing around medical resourcing now. And people are so stressed and it's so difficult for them to follow what something's being called and what is the list of symptoms that goes with it. And when people can't follow, and you can find interviews with child predators, with people who have all kinds of perpetrators of different kinds of crime. And what do they look for? They look for stressed, miserable people who can't keep up and can barely take care of themselves because there will be no repercussions. And this is not just a perpetrator who might swipe a child or a perpetrator who might do some other thing. This is also the marketing that is telling us what we're supposed to do in a crisis, and that marketing is conspicuously financed by people who have an interest in things like population control and genocide and all kinds of other topics that we could get into. And it's the subject for me. I don't know if I ever mentioned this before, but I'll touch on it. It's one of my favorites, is that there was a point in my life where I learned if I'm going to be in a romantic relationship with someone or in any kind of close, intimate relationship, here is how to kind of notice their actions and their words and their body language so that I know they are respecting me. Yes. So that I know that they care for my safety, not pretending to care for my safety, but they really care for my safety. And I had a certain kind of crash course about that because I was sex trafficked. But every moment today and ongoing, more than ever, we have to tune to that kind of body language, but not just for individuals, for marketing organizations, for healthcare organizations. We have to be noticing, are these people who are making big messages about how great they are at taking care of us, are they really taking care of us? And if they're not, we need to really examine the circumstances we're in.
Exactly, yeah. You are absolutely right about that. The same as this diagnosis now, as I was mentioning prior, that SADS, SADS, Sudden Adult Death Syndrome. This is a new diagnosis just invented this year. How can we invent something like that? It does not make sense.
And when you look in the documentation, when you look at the health interventions that are resulting in the symptoms that are then called SADS, it's all in the documentation. The documentation is out there, and people don't have the time to read it, or they're afraid to read it, or they can't. It's upsetting to watch how people suffer when that is going on. And also we are really noticing, well, we have opportunities to have really caring, open conversations, and not like, one of the things we're very careful about is parts of these conversations, these debates, these arguments going on in the public sphere. People are conditioned to lash out at each other, to be really harsh, to make fun of each other, to make rude statements, to get some power leverage in a situation that they feel vulnerable in. And the more that we find ways to be really patient, even with someone who is lashing out, because people are under terrible stress, that it's not visible. You don't know what's happening in somebody's world when you interface with them. But if we remember that we don't necessarily know one another's languages, or why is it we're using the words we're using, until we take some time and we talk with kindness and respect, and we practice that. And then we find a way to actually communicate, whereas most of what goes on in the public sphere is not communication. It's mimetics. And so we can really change everything about this by just refusing to argue about it, and always making space for the conversations that are needed in the gentlest way. And now everybody can participate in those conversations. And what happens is perpetrators become really obvious. They can't move in those environments.
I am a thinker. I like to think all the time. It's a problem with me. That's my problem. I am so unwanted in this society.
Oh, I feel what you say so much.
I am unwanted in any society. I know that.
You are wanted in my society.
Thank you. Because, sometimes I compare the time, like we are here, like our country now, it's like considered like an empire, Well, next one would be Russia or China, whatever. So we are like an empire, and I'm comparing with the Roman Empire, for example. So many people, there was only elite at the top, and then you have slaves. And people think here that we are free. This is in only the illusion.
Yes.
This is not. We are all actually considered slaves. That's why. But we don't know it. Like we majority of us don't know it. I know it. That's why I call myself a free woman. I am never gonna be a slave.
More people are finding out.
It's comparable. It is comparable.
Well, it's actually really direct and specific. It's just you have to think in a different way to recognize it. It's not even like I guess you might be tempted to call it a subtler form of slavery, but if you really look at how it's going on and how people are affected at the intersectional crevices that people fall into, where there is really extreme suffering, nobody knows that it's going on unless they're there. Yes. And when you look at that, it's not a subtler form of slavery. It's mass hypnosis in a lot of ways that keeps people from recognizing the suffering in front of them or next door or down the street.
That's a better way to put it than I am putting it. I kind of go with the history, when I compare Roman Empire to this, and I'm trying to find out the differences, because I know the difference is only the time, but everything else remains the same.
Well, I would say the Roman Empire is a really relevant reference. The behaviors we're talking about, the patterns we're talking about, and the historical patterns that we're talking about, not only with the Roman Empire, but wow, the Roman Empire is really a relevant subject. We might unpack that at a later date, because that is a subject of conversation for us.
That's why that movie Gladiator came to my mind.
I'm going to watch it again. I think I found it. I think I'll watch it again soon so that I can remember it better. Thank you for reminding me of it.
I really felt like that man who lost his family and was fighting for the empire, who actually killed his family. I am fighting against the healthcare sector who murdered my daughter.
and you're doing it inside the construct that those powerful influences have set up to make people have to navigate in order to get real freedom in their lives. You have to know how to navigate the structures that have been set up so that you can even extract yourself from them.
Yes, that's true. That's exactly true.
And what you're doing is helping a lot of other people extract themselves from them a lot more easily than they would be able to if they had never heard the story that you're telling.
People need to start waking up to this. We all can be free. We all can consider ourselves free if we are awake. I mean, like spiritually awake. I don't mean just awake at the daytime and go sleep at night. I mean spiritually awake.
Wakefulness. Yeah, I agree. We're all helping each other be more wakeful.
So we can never be fooled by the globalists or people who think they are above us, because nobody, by God, we are all equal. Nobody is supposed to be above us.
Yeah, and where as individuals, each of us may feel scared, may feel like non-functional, like we just cannot do the things that we need to do. When we maintain some kind of contact with one another and make sure that we have opportunities to be caring towards one another and know one another is there are so many ways that just sharing information makes our brain function so much more functional. I have repaired my brain because there were people I found who were willing to interact with me when nobody else would. And I would never have been able to repair from the neurological injuries that I had if it wasn't for that. So it's really powerful just to know one another and stay in contact with one another.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
And then we are able to notice where we're being taken advantage of because we have more brain function. We have more individual brain function and more collective brain function. And when we share these stories, we can take much better care of ourselves in medical environments. We didn't even go through all of your notes. Do you want to continue your notes where we were at? Did we get through all of them?
I think we went through everything. Yeah, I kind of was looking at the notes and I probably talk about certain things way back, and then I kind of I would be repeating myself.
Okay. All right. I wasn't quite tracking where you were at, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I think that we probably have covered everything from my notes. and I will like to do more interviews because I would like to talk. I have lots of stuff to talk about, lots of stuff. And I want people to be awake. I really want people to be awake.